Thanks for joining me for another episode of Beyond the Table. Sure hope that you're enjoying these podcasts, that they're adding value to your life, because that's really what we want to do, whether you're from the church world, the business world, it doesn't matter. And I'm so honored today to have Pastor Dan Hunter with us, the lead pastor at Grace Church here in Houston, and just ministered an incredible word to our men. And you know, the message is phenomenal, but if you're like me, I love seeing men respond and seeing those altars full of men. That for me, that's what it was all about. It was just great. Just phenomenal word tonight. And so,
well, it's an honor to be here with you at the church. I just believe in this church, and then to be a part of the men's thing, and then even to be able to come here and share with people is great. It's an honor.
Thanks,
Thank you,
man. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. And so I want to ask you a few leadership questions, maybe some culture questions as it pertains to your church. We've been talking about culture a lot on our podcast, because I've learned that one of my main roles here, and if you own a business, if you're a leader in a business, one of the main roles you have is to be the creator of culture, the curator of culture, and almost the guardian of culture. And so what are some of the things that you guys find in your culture that you're like, we have to pay attention to this?
Yeah, well, I think the unique thing, and you probably share this with people all the time, but for us, we recognize that culture will be created. Unintentionally or intentionally, it will be created. So you have to be a little bit proactive in saying, okay, I'm not going to have accidental culture. I want to have intentional culture. And so whether you want it or not, culture gets created.
That's so good. Yeah.
And so either by what you do or what you don't do, but culture gets created. So no matter where you are, business world, church world, pastoring, leading a ministry, serving and leading a department, no matter where it is, you have to recognize culture is real, and that culture is going to happen.
Yeah.
So we first off, we recognize that. So we have to go, okay, I want to be intentional, and I want to have intentional culture, and this is the way we want to be. So we're going to have to lean into that. And then we hold ourselves to that, because there has to be an accountability on your own side that says, okay, we're not going to allow this. We are going to push for this, and this is just what we're going to do. Yeah.
Man, I love that. And I think that's true in every organization.
For sure.
It's definitely true in church. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
So you better be intentional about it happening. You've been on staff at churches. You've planted a church and started from ground zero, and now at Grace. How do you manage the tension in growth? And honestly, how do you get simpler and more focused? Because here's what I have found. Growth leads to complexity.
Yes.
Complexity kills growth.
Oh, my word. That is really good.
And you have to fight for simple.
You do.
And so I'm asking, honest as a friend, how do you really do that?
Man, I don't know if I have all the answers. I know some things that we wrestle with in our own mind is so important, because you're right. Complexity can kill growth. And with growth, things naturally begin to grow, and we begin to just start things, and good things.
Yeah.
And it's not that you're starting things that aren't good. They are good. But the bigger you get, you have to recognize that it's important for you to lean into the God things, not the good things. And just because it lines up with God's word doesn't mean you need to do it, or you need to do it right now. And so there's a timing in, but there's also the actual, should I do it? Should I do it, or should I do it right now? And those two questions are big, because even though it's good, it doesn't mean you're called to it. There's a lot of churches that don't do women's ministry, men's ministry, or big events. They lean in and they do just Sunday morning. We're going to reach people. We're going to do youth and kids, and we're going to do small groups.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean anyone who does women's ministry or men's ministry is wrong, because obviously there is a massive need for that. We do women's and men's ministry at our church, but it's because we feel like it's part of who God has called us to be. And so that's really the key. It's who has God called you to be, because you got to look at the God things. What is God calling your business to do, or your ministry team, or your department, whatever it might be? Because you have to go, okay, this is good. This is really good.
Yeah.
But is it God?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that you need to kind of make sure and hit is the bigger you get, you have to continue to make your vision known, because the truth of it is that if you don't have a vision for your business or whatever it is, if you don't have a vision for your church, if you don't have a vision, other people will.
Yes.
And they do. And so you have to kind of go, okay, our vision is not for sale.
Yeah.
It's just not for sale. And this is what God's called us to. And here's what a lot of people don't recognize is what God's called you to also defines what God has not called you to.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
So if God calls you to something, it also lets you know all the things that God hasn't called you. Hey, that's great. There's a lot of churches that are going to do that. But what we're going to do is this. I think you just have to know that. And so for us, obviously, man, that's a thing. And so we ask ourselves questions that kind of help run through it. Like, one of the questions that we ask is a DNA question. So does this ministry, this thing, the complexity that people want us to add, does the decision that we're trying to make on this ministry or this thing, does it reflect our mission, our vision, our strategy, our culture? Because you have to ask yourself, is this who we are, who God called us to be?
Yeah.
Right? Does that make sense?
Oh, yes, it does.
Because as you grow in your business or whatever, you're going to be tempted to add things and to do things just because we're bigger.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily wrong. If you're bigger, you can do things that you couldn't when you were smaller, but you don't just add them just because you can.
Right.
It's not whether or not you can, it's whether or not you should.
So good.
And so it's got to line up with that vision piece, and you got to make sure that you're in that. And we just talked about culture a second ago, but it's your culture, your DNA is a combination of what you create and what you allow. So what you create and what you allow ends up being your DNA. And so as you're growing, you're going to be tempted to be more complex. Wow. But the bigger you get, you got to fight to be smaller, simpler, streamlined. One of the largest grossing food chains in the world is Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
And yet Chick-fil-A, if you want beef, don't go to Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
Right. If you want appetizers, don't go there. They as they've grown, they've added some things, but it's all around who they are.
Yeah.
The chicken. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that we can learn something from that,
I think so. That's so good, because I'm sure you're like me and any other leader, because there's some tension in growth of several things. One is they want you to add.
Mm-hmm. They do.
And then sometimes you're wanting not to, and you're wanting to kill. The other thing is, as the organization grows and you're trying to get simpler, you yourself are having to grow with the organization. But there are some people that like you the way you were.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my daughter-in-law said something a while back, and she says, sometimes you don't lead people, you just kind of begin to grow past them. And so how do you guys, as a staff, as a team, as a pastor, because, we love people, but let's be honest, how do you lead as a leader when you're trying to stay simple, but yet everything around you is growing?
Yeah, see, that's tough, because it's back to these questions, like the first one, does whatever it is, does the complex, does this new ministry, this new thing that we're launching, does it reflect our mission? Is it what God's called us to?
Yeah.
But it does lean into the idea that the bigger you get, you're going to have to make decisions.
Yeah.
And, I had a friend call me the other day, it was a couple weeks actually, but a couple weeks ago, and was like, hey, I need you to talk with me about starting a second service. It becomes a little more complex. We need more volunteers. We need more this. And he goes, I love, our people love the way we are. The people love to see everybody. The people love a packed room. As a speaker, I love a packed room. I just need you to talk to me. and tell me, I can list 100 things I love about the way we are, but talk with me about why we should start a second service.
Yeah.
And I thought about it, and there was a lot of leadership points I could actually say about that to him, but I just slowed down and I went, okay, I'm gonna make this really short for you, and then we can talk about everything else if you want. But you know what you love more than all those things you just listed? You know what you love more than a packed room? What you love more than the way it used to be? What you love more than all that? You know what you love? Is reaching people for Jesus.
Yeah.
And right now, because of your room, it's packed. You literally wouldn't have room for 30 more people if they showed up. So what you love more than the way it used to be is continuing to reach more people. So here's the principle behind that. You have to point to what really matters.
Yeah.
Constantly. So in the complexity, so even though that was almost the opposite, we're saying, hey, make it a little more complex and add a thing.
Yeah.
It still is this exact same thing. It's what is it that we're really trying to do? And if it's our purpose and our mission, we have to lean into it. But it also means if it's our purpose and our mission, we have to say no to those things.
Yeah.
And sometimes the biggest and greatest yes is a no. Because whenever you say no to complexity, what you're saying yes to is simple.
Yeah.
And whenever you say no to doing something or expanding or doing that, when you say no to those things that make you more complex, you got to recognize with that no, you're saying yes to the things of who you are and your purpose. So no and yes are together. When you say yes, you're saying no. And when you say no, you're saying yes. So sometimes the greatest yes to who you are is to simply say, no, we're not going to do that. That it's not wrong to do it. It's actually great to do it. And there's churches all around that do it. There's businesses that do it. We're just not called to that. And we're going to say no, which is actually saying yes. And I think for us, it comes down to a second question. You know, we talked about a first one, but a second one is this idea of consequences. So we ask ourselves this question: what will be the immediate and long-term outcome of this decision? If we say yes, what's the immediate outcome and the long-term? And then what's the short-term? And so if you can kind of map out the consequences, what does this do to who we are? What does this do to our people? What does this do that? Then not only will it help you say yes or no, it'll also help you know how to vision cast to your staff, to your people, to your key leaders. So you'll know how to dangle that what you love most, that win.
Yeah.
Here's why, because the why is more important than the what.
Yeah.
And so if you can dangle that why, it helps you to stay simple, right? Because every action has consequences. So ask yourself, what is the short term? What is the long term consequences of that?
See, man, that's so good on so many levels, because it really helps whenever you're able to think through the process by answering those questions, because you're really communicating what is our highest value and what is our highest return.
Yeah.
If you're like us, you know, I have limited resources. I have limited people. I heard Tommy Barnett say one time, he says, I don't care how big you get, you'll never have enough volunteers, and you'll never have enough hot dogs at the church picnic. And so
never have enough people, never have enough hot dogs.
And so there's some truth in that. So you've got to be able to steward what you have extremely well.
That's really good. Because sometimes we look at what we don't have and we think we got to do something. And that may be true sometimes, but you're right. No matter how big you get, no matter how big your company is, you're always going to have challenges.
Yeah.
Challenges are on every level. So don't make decisions based on your challenges.
No.
Right?
Yeah, that's so good. So what do systems look like, and kind of for you guys, in processes and strategies? And I ask that for this reason. In the concept of staying simple, I heard this or read this quote one time. It said that they said policies and processes are scar tissue from a past mistake. So as you grow, someone makes a mistake, somebody messes up, you implement a new process, you implement a policy, and after a while, it simply becomes a bunch of scar tissue or red tape.
Yeah.
And it creates more complexity.
Rules and all those things are just scar tissue of stuff that's happened. But here's what you got to realize. Every rule you implement and every standard you enforce and all that, you have to actually step in and do something about it when people cross it.
Right.
So you're actually creating more busyness because every time you implement a rule, you have to also enforce that rule. And do you really want to do that?
That's good.
Like, are you making it more complex? Now, some rules have to happen.
Sure. 100%.
But at the same time, don't just make it on an outlier one-time thing. So a lot of issues that we have to deal with, like rules and things like that, we actually handle case by case. So just because it's a case doesn't mean you got to now do a blanket rule.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I do.
Handle it case by case. You know,
That's good.
Yeah.
I like that.
And we also like a few more things, and these aren't complex systems. And I think that's the key, is understanding as a leader that systems don't have to be complex. They just need to be in place.
Yeah, and they need to be efficient.
Yes. So it could be simply, have we prayed? Have we prayed about this?
Yeah.
Whether that's a day, a week, have we prayed about it? And what does everybody feel?
Yeah.
And we take that, and then we are able to kind of work through what people have heard from God, but it also gives God time to work on people's hearts that are all yes and need to be a no, or no and need to be a yes. So have we prayed about it? Have we thought those consequences that we talked about, long-term and short-term? The DNA, does it reflect who we are? So these are questions. So our systems are based around those type of things. And here's why it's important. Most of our systems are questions saying, hey, are we doing this right? We can't get caught up in the emotion of the moment. You gotta lead and let the Spirit of God, let leadership take its course and leading you on that, right? Because if you can answer the right questions, you can prevent making the wrong decisions.
Yeah.
So write down those systems or those questions and do that. And I think we all get that, we get it. We get the idea of the right thing in the wrong time is wrong. We also get that the wrong thing anytime is wrong.
Yeah.
But we want to do the right thing for our organization and our church. We want to do the right thing at the right time. So what systems do you need to implement to ensure it's the right thing and it's the right time?
Yeah.
So figuring that out, building some systems, some staircases there. And you just have to know that rarely do we as leaders have a results problem.
Yeah.
We don't have result problems. We have system problems. If you're not getting the result that you're used to getting or that you want to get, you don't have a problem with results. You have a problem with systems. So you're asking systems, right?
Yeah.
So what is it? How does the system work? Whether that's a checklist, whether that's answering questions, whether it's wrestling through the things, you have to implement those systems. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm a systems guy, but I don't want to be a slave to my system because I'm a vision guy.
Yeah.
And so there's this tension oftentimes between vision and management.
Yeah.
And management wants to mitigate all risk while vision says, I want to go for it.
Huh.
And so and sometimes you
have to, man, that's really good. You have to balance that, man. That's tough.
You have to balance that. Wow. You have to manage that because there is a tension between the two. You can't have one without the other.
Yeah, because we want to go.
Yeah.
But we also need to manage, Yeah. That's really good.
And if you don't do that well, you can say, man, I had all this vision, I had all this dreams, and then somebody else is going to follow you, and what was your dream now becomes their nightmare.
Sure.
Because you didn't manage or steward it well.
Yeah.
And so, I've just found these to be true. And it doesn't matter if it's a business, it doesn't matter if it's a church. I can tell you there's things here, people said, hey, we should do this and do this and do this. I said, you know what? That church right down the road is really good at that.
Right.
And I tell you what we're going to do is we're going to help support what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because we might be able to do it, but that's not what God's called us to. And we probably aren't going to be good at it if we did do it.
All right.
And I think a lot of leaders are really so either intimidated or maybe even fearful to admit we may not be that good at that.
Right.
Or worse, maybe God's not called us to that.
Yes.
And
I like
be okay with that.
Yeah, I like how you said there's a church down there that does. I think that's so smart because you don't have to start a food kitchen or a food pantry or, helping shelters, and you don't have to do that. Find someone that's already doing it in your area. And for us, we help finance the second largest homeless shelter in Houston.
Yeah.
We didn't start one.
Yeah.
But we just said, you know what, we can refer and help. And so we give financial in that. There's people in our church that a couple of years ago that wanted to, COVID hit and everybody was wanted to like really lean in and they wanted us to open a food pantry on our place and begin to do it. And the thing is, we made a decision a long time ago. I love that, you know,
Yeah.
and we, with the help of a lot of people, HEB, Convoy of Hope, all these people, they gave us food. And for a better part of a year, man, it was like every other week we gave out groceries and stuff. But here's what we knew. Partnering with people who already had that is more beneficial for us. So when people come in now, instead of going, yeah, we got one back here, here's where it is. And we support them financially. And we even collect food and give it to those places.
Yeah.
And let them do it. So we're givers of people that are already doing it well.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Oh, I do. We do the same thing.
Yeah, which kind of leans into, instead of having to start everything, recognize that we are the body of Christ.
Yeah.
And the way I look at it is like this. And I hope this isn't too cheesy, but the way I look at it is the church is made up of a lot of departments. You have senior adult ministry, you have kids ministry, youth ministry, young adult ministry. You know, the senior adult ministry doesn't take 15 minutes out of their gathering to go to the playscape and play.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they don't sing Father Abraham.
Has
you know,
many
yeah, they don't do that. And the kids ministry may not sing old hymns.
Yeah.
You know, why? Because they're reaching them. And I kind of look at it, sometimes I back up and I go, you know what churches are? Departments in God's global church.
Yes.
So one church may be a prayer center. One church may be focusing on teenagers. One church may be focusing on this. And it's like, if we can, and those are all metaphors. I don't mean
No.
But it's like, you know, if one church is leaning into community outreach, why do we have to compete? Man, we can join. And so recognizing that our church isn't the only church, it's God's big C church.
Yeah.
And that works, you know, for us to lean into that a little bit, you know.
Yeah, we have found the same to be true. You know, years ago, I was looking at in the first 3 chapters of Revelation, he said to the church of this, the church of that, the church of this, church of that. So I wrote a letter to the church of Mont Bellevue.
Huh.
But it wasn't just to me. It wasn't just to Mercygate. Because when I'm reading that, understand the history, the geography, there wasn't just one central place. There were many house churches in that area, but all of them are carrying a piece that needed to be done. And we find that to be true out here. And like you said, concentrate on the big C instead of the little c. And you can get a lot more done and accomplished.
Because there's churches that do citywide events, you know. There's other churches that can't do citywide events.
Yeah.
It doesn't make one right and one wrong. We're all the church. And if we can come together, man, and recognize that and keep our eyes on that. I tell people all the time, I even said it this morning in service. I said, look, there are a lot of great churches in Houston.
Yeah.
We're glad you're here today.
Yeah.
And we hope that you connect to Jesus. We hope that you connect to people. But there are a lot of great churches. I'm glad that you're here. You need to get in one. It's not about our church.
Yeah.
It really isn't. It's about God's church, and God's church is bigger than that, you know.
And what's been so great, Dan, watching you guys and watching your team is you guys don't just talk that. I've watched you live it. I've watched you help and encourage others. And your team is some of the biggest cheerleaders I know of other churches.
I want that to be true. I want that to be true.
Well, we have found it to be true.
Yeah. And, that's definitely one of those culture things that we're not willing to compromise on. You know?
Well, it has come through. It has shown bright, and man, I appreciate your investment in us. I appreciate your investment in our church, and man, you guys' investment in me personally.
Thank you.
I so appreciate that, and thank you for taking the time this evening to
let me give you one
kind of walk through this. Give me one more bonus.
One more question to ask yourself when you're trying to stay simple and fight against that complexity is a question of investigation. Have I researched what it really means? You know, what it really takes? Have I done the due diligence to walk through and call churches that are doing it and see if that's even something that matches what you need to do. Because sometimes what we found is, hey, let's launch this. Let's launch this ministry. Let's launch this. And then we've called churches, Nashville, called churches in Orlando, called churches in Alabama, California. And we've said, hey, you guys did this. Talk with us about that. And what we found is, man, in some cases, they were like, that has been one of the biggest drains to our staff and finances that we could ever have. And it put a pause button on it for us. And we're like, wait, we're getting into territory that's a little complex here, that we need to make sure that we're being good stewards of the resources God's given you. And so doing investigation can show you some pitfalls and holes and hurdles that are on the other side of that decision that complexity brings. And if you can see them before you launch it, you save yourself a huge heartache, right? Because everything's going to demand, some type of effort, whether it's financial or time or work or people. And you've got to do your investigation to make sure it doesn't change who you are. And it doesn't. And you got to know where the tax is coming. It's going to tax you. So where is it? And then go, no, that is the complexity I avoid. That is the issue I avoid, right? Don't do anything until you look at what has been done by others so that you can learn from what they're doing. And that'll help you. It'll help you say no.
I think that's so huge. Because it'll define, should I even do this?
Right. Absolutely.
It's not a matter of then, could we do it? Do we have the resources to do it? Do we have the manpower to do it? Yes. But after gaining that information,
so good.
Should we even tackle this?
Yes.
I have a friend of mine. They live, they pastored in a very, very influential area in the Northeast. And they had a few people in their church who wanted to build a homeless shelter. Okay. There were no homeless that lived in their community. But the thing was, about 20 miles down the road, there was homeless people, and there needed to be something there. And there was a homeless shelter there, but they felt like they needed their own. And so they went for it. They did it. Then they got in a major conflict with the city because build it and they will come. And the city was like, we had this down the road. We could have supported this down the road. It's not that we're against.
Right.
But we could have made this twice or three times the size it was better. And it goes back to partnering with those who are already doing it.
Well, and doing an investigation with the city. Hey, we're thinking about this. If it's something that impacts the city, call them and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Well, has anyone tried that here? There's nobody here with it. And they may go, you know what? I'll tell you why. Here, the homeless population is 0.05%. 20 minutes away, it's 28%. So you ought to throw your resources that direction because we just don't have, that could have said, man, that's good.
That could have saved a ton.
It's part of that investigation.
And it builds that relationship. That I'm not pastoring my church. I'm really pastoring a community. I have a voice in this community, and therefore I have a responsibility in the community. We did that with the project out front. Though Chick-fil-A and others said, yes, I want to go to the city and say, hey, where are you guys at? Because I want to be a good partner with the city. And they're like, you could help us fix a problem that we created years ago if we could help do a look. And so we were able to do that, and it became a win-win-win instead of us win, you lose. But it goes back to that investigation.
You called the city and engaged other people so you could see what the history is, what it takes, what's around, why. And when you do that, you're able to lean in. I think you started this whole discussion about growth. Growth brings complexity. Complexity kills growth. And I think it comes back to that point of going, when you grow, your business, your ministry, your department, your church, when you grow, everything starts to grow. And so what you've got to do is go, okay, we can't grow just anywhere and everywhere. We got to have controlled growth. And I think the danger is exactly what you said. When you grow, things start getting complicated because you want everything to grow. And then you spread yourself so thin that you start doing good things instead of God things. Keep it about what God's called you to in your business, in your ministry. And I love that picture. I haven't been able to shake it since you started at the beginning, that growth will bring more growth.
Yeah.
And you got to make sure it's growth, but not complexity.
Yeah.
That's 100%. Really good.
100%.
Yeah.
So, well, man, thanks for joining me today. I sure appreciate it. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Beyond the Table. Listen, take the conversation that we've had at the table, go beyond it, and begin to implement it into your world, into your business, into your church or ministry. Hey, God bless you. We'll see you next time.
Be blessed.
Out.